As we know, divided parties don't win elections. So unless they want to indulge in a bout of suicide, they would be very wise not to try and tear apart the current position, because that would just be grandstanded by their opponents. What they need to do right now is unite behind Gavin Robinson, unite behind the position they democratically agreed to when they went back into government a few weeks ago, and they need to face a general election.
Now, Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill has said she's determined to ensure the continuing function of the devolved Assembly and Executive, following Sir Jeffrey Donaldson's shock resignation after being charged with rape and other historical sexual offences earlier this week. Gavin Robinson, the interim leader of the DUP, has hit back at opponents, criticising them for attempting to score cheap political points after the news. And Mr Donaldson is understood to be strenuously contesting all the charges made against him. Well, let's talk to Shaun Woodward, former Northern Ireland Secretary. Good morning to you, Shaun.
Good morning.
And thanks so much for joining us this Easter Day. Were you shocked when you heard that news about Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, his arrest and immediate resignation?
I think, like everybody, I was completely shocked. It was just not something I was remotely expecting, anticipating, and it's obviously very important that the judicial process happens. It's important that we protect the integrity of that process. There are individuals, obviously, who brought forward these accusations. The police obviously have investigated them, and as I understand it, Mr. Donaldson Sir Jeffrey will be appearing in court later in April to face those charges. That process has got to go ahead. So it doesn't then surprise me that he resigned and that the DUP has an interim leader. But yes, it was a huge shock, and I'm sure everybody is shocked. And from everybody concerned, it's important the process happens. But this is very challenging for them all as individuals. And there are potentially victims in this, and that's very important for us to recognise that as we talk about this issue.
And we know that, managing the different opinions within the DUP has been very difficult indeed. And we know that Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, after 2 years when we had no functioning assembly or executive in Northern Ireland, he managed to get the party to a point where it would agree to going back into the power sharing executive. Now, we've heard from Michelle O'Neill, Sinn Féin's First Minister, and also Gavin Robinson, who's now the interim leader of the DUP, and other senior figures in the party, that they do want those institutions to continue. But do you think, given how difficult it has been to get the politics functioning again in Northern Ireland, that there is a jeopardy there?
There's undoubtedly a jeopardy, but there always is in the politics of Northern Ireland. I think there's nothing like a general election to focus the minds, however. And Jeffrey Donaldson has stood down now. There is an interim leader, Gavin Robinson, as you say. The First Minister and Deputy First Minister of two different parties, of course, have all said that they are confident in the strength of the institution continuing. I think we should probably take that on face value. I think the bigger question right now is, what on earth does the DUP do in the face of a pending general election? And just a moment ago, you were looking at just what on earth that might mean for the Conservative Party here in Great Britain. But for the DUP, this is also now a real challenge. And as we know, divided parties don't win elections. So unless they want to indulge in a bout of suicide, they would be very wise not to try and tear apart the current position, because that would just be grandstanded by their opponents. What they need to do right now is unite behind Gavin Robinson, unite behind the position they democratically agreed to when they went back into government a few weeks ago, and they need to face a general election. And, Carol, what's interesting, and I was just looking at the numbers, there are 2 seats, for example, for the DUP, which they currently hold in Belfast East and Antrim South, where the majorities are 3,000 or less. Those are the sorts of numbers that Rishi Sunak would dream about in terms of being able to hold on to seats with it. In other words, these numbers disappear very easily with mood swings and changes of mind. So the DUP needs to get its act together, hold itself together. It's trying to do that. Maybe it will be successful. It has on its heels the UUP. It has on its heels other political parties led by Jim Allister, for example, who has not been slow in coming forward to jump on the events of the weekend. I think what matters here for Northern Ireland's point of view is that everybody holds their nerve, and that would be my counsel to the DUP. You've got a difficult situation. Manage it.
And we know that while the DUP are going through this very difficult process, and they will presumably have to come up with a proper process to elect a replacement to Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, Gavin Robinson is now in place as an interim leader. Are you concerned, though, that that means that this almost vacuum that we've had for over 2 years, where nothing gets decided, nothing gets delivered, voters in Northern Ireland get increasingly frustrated about that situation continues?
No, I'm not, because I think the hard reality here will very much come into play. And Gavin Robinson and the Deputy First Minister, Emma Little Pengelly, I'm sure are going to be saying to the DUP right now, look, if we break away, if we break into division right now and start arguing about what we're doing, we will face electoral meltdown, and we possibly will be finished for the short term. So if they want to hold on to their seats at the next general election, they've got to unite right now and show that however difficult this weekend's events have been, and they will of course be in the media spotlight in the months ahead, nonetheless they've got to stick together. If they don't stick together, then they're going to hang together, and by which I mean they're going to lose seats at the general election. And that's got to be the message that will be being rung out at every quarter in this party over this weekend.
And of course, in the meantime, Sinn Fein appear to be going from strength to strength, both sides of the border. Do you think that we should be wary of the repercussions of that?
Well, I'm not wary of this Sinn Fein taking positions of political responsibility, whether you agree or you disagree with the goal of Sinn Fein to create a united Ireland, is an issue for people in the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland to resolve. And of course, that's what the Good Friday Agreement allows, if it is felt a majority of people would actually want to have a vote. So I'm not worried about that. And I think, one of the things that I feel, in amongst all of this difficulty is so striking is the strength of the foundation pillars of the Good Friday Agreement. You take nothing for granted in politics. You'd be a complete fool if you did. But what is interesting is that over the last 25, 26 years or so, we've seen the Good Friday Agreement tested in all kinds of ways. We've seen First Ministers come and go. We saw Ian Paisley come and go, for example. All of these people, Martin McGuinness had led the party. Martin is now dead. What I'm trying to say here is it's surviving. And I think that's a huge tribute to the construction of the Good Friday Agreement. And I think it will endure. It will be tested at the election. And it doesn't follow that the DUP are going to do as well as they had imagined they would do this time last week. And Sinn Fein may do even better. But it will be the Ulster Unionist Party that I would be looking at right now, what Doug Beattie has to say, that I think is the most interesting dimension of this. Does the Ulster Unionist Party, which of course put the Good Friday Agreement together, the DUP sat on the sidelines and indeed said never, they then benefited from it having happened. Right now, the Ulster Unionist Party, politics is also a long game as well as a short game, Carol, as you know. This is possibly a big moment for the Ulster Unionist Party.